Welcome back, everybody, to another in my aviation news roundup series, and we'll be looking at some of the headlines of some of the stuff that happened in November. Now, surprisingly, I went through my videos and I realized I never actually published a video back at the beginning of November covering October news, and I looked and I actually filmed everything for a October, a November, early November release on this. And sorry, my cell phone's going off. I'll mute that. I recorded everything. I had a script. I recorded it. I just never actually went through and edited that video. So I apologize for not putting out a news video last month, but we're going to go through this month and we'll take a look at some of the stuff that I wanted to talk about in that last video that I missed, and we'll catch up with it going forward. So as usual, I do have a script I'll be referencing on the computer screen just to make sure I don't miss anything. And again, as usual, if there's anything out there that you guys want me to include in one of these news videos, down below there'll be an email. Send me that link. Go over to Facebook, message me on Facebook, here on YouTube, in the comment sections, whatever it is. Just get the message to me being like, hey, talk about this, or you missed this, or you made a mistake with that. By all means, send that information over. I will be more than happy to go over any of that stuff that you want me to. On that note, let's jump right into this. And as always, my name is Sean, and this is Sean's Aviation. Before we jump into this, I want to say thank you to everyone out there who is watching. If you haven't yet and you are enjoying what you watch, down below, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. All of that does help me and this channel grow and get out to more people who are interested in this content. So that is all helpful. And thank you to everybody out there who has already liked or subscribed or left comments or anything like that on my videos. So we'll get right into it. Really, the big bit of kind of Canadian aviation news that came out was just a couple of days ago. It was officially announced that the RCAF is purchasing the P-8 Poseidon as a CP-140 replacement. There was a request for proposals a little while ago. They got pricing. There was a bit of a kerfuffle with Bombardier. I think I might have gone into this in the past couple of videos, talking about Bombardier wanting to do a maritime patrol variant of the Global and how ridiculous that is because it's a paper airplane and we're not buying another project on the drawing board and going through that whole process of converting an aircraft to Canadian needs. We did it with the CASA 295. We've done it with the CH-148 based off the S-92. There's too many of these cases where the RCAF goes through this competitive process and literally picks the cheapest option on paper, but that usually involves an aircraft that hasn't been developed yet. And it becomes a whole process and it's multiple delays and it just puts everything at risk. So they're literally buying an off the shelf, ready to go platform. We're supposed to get first deliveries in 2026. We're gonna get the P-8s before we get the F-35s, effectively, is what we're looking at, which is ridiculous in my opinion, but also great because those CP-140s are definitely nearing the end of their lifespan. A lot of them went through an upgrade process not too long ago with some new sensors and some new equipment and electronics, but that can only get them so far, and they're really at end of life, and that was an upgrade that had been kicked down the road for so long that most of that equipment is already kind of too old and not powerful enough to do what we needed to do with. So really, and if you think about it, if we get the first P-8 in 2026, they're not really going to be fully operational until the 2030 range, and that's going to put the CP-140 at 50 years old, which that's time to move on to something new. So it's not like it's still what, with 2023, it's still 6 to 7 years away before full implementation and operational readiness. So it's going to be a bit of a process, but I'm glad that they're finally moving forward to something. They're picking something off the shelf. It's a great platform also because it is used by a lot of our allies. All of the Five Eyes use it. The US, English, Australia, and New Zealand currently operate them. Now with us, that gives us a lot of data sharing capability, interoperability, crew, exchange, all that kind of stuff. Parts, you know, if you're overseas doing missions and something goes wrong and your ally right next to you is flying the exact same aircraft type, it is really easy to cross support amongst allies. We've also got Germany buying them. There's a number of other countries. I think South Korea is flying them. There's a number of other aircraft that are allies and air forces that are operating this airframe. So, like I said, crew exchange, parts, support. It's so much easier when you're flying something similar to what other countries are flying. So that is huge news. We're going to be looking forward to keeping an eye out when that stuff starts showing up and what schemes are going to be in and all that kind of stuff. They've already announced it's 16 aircraft split between the two bases, Greenwood on the east and Comox on the west coast. So pretty much exactly what's currently going on with the CP-140. So again, though, it'll be really cool to see kind of what we see, schemes, what they pick and all that other stuff, and get these things into operation. So, excuse me. That was big news. Also, right around the same time that was announced, it was also announced that Porter is adding more aircraft to their fleet. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head of the Dash 8s. I believe they're operating somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 or so Dash 8s in their fleet. And they currently have, let's see if I can remember off the top of my head, 30. They have 30 Embraers that they purchased, but they also had options for another 50 on top of that 30 when they first bought the airframe, and they just announced they're going to exercise 25 of those options. So they will have 55 Embraers when all is said and done if they don't exercise any more options. And they are a real Canadian success story. I mean, they're only 17 years old, and they started flying a handful of Dash 8s out of the island to Montreal and to Ottawa, out of Toronto, and within that 17 years, then Aero expanded to across Canada and international routes with the Embraers, and they're putting a lot of airlines to the run. You've seen, especially in Ottawa here, we've seen a drop in flare flights as Porter is putting pressure on them, and you're seeing a little bit of a price competitiveness with some of the other legacy airlines, with Air Canada and WestJet and stuff like that, when it comes to some of the inter-Canada routes, because Porter's just doing it at a price point that these other airlines just can't meet. So it's really good that they're kind of putting that pressure, and it gives a good competition in the rest of the market. So it's very interesting to see where those will go, and I'm very excited to see more an expanded network with Porter as they can move more into the US. They got Fort Lauderdale, they've got Vegas. As they expand into the US, it just gives more options for travelers, and I'm a big fan of Porter. I've flown them a few times. They have great service, great prices. It's a great airline to operate on. I'm not being sponsored in any way. I just think they're a really good airline, and I've enjoyed the few times I've flown with them. So all the best to Porter, and I hope they have success with the Embraers, and I'll be keeping my eye out on where they go. The final big kind of headline kind of ties in to the next section, and that's sort of in the, it's part news, part air show, and that is that it has officially been announced by the head of the Italian Air Force that their national display team, the Frecce Tricolori, they will be in North America next year. Specifically, they want to do, they said they'll be doing air shows and fly pasts in Canada and whatnot for the RCAF 100th anniversary, as well as they want to be in Los Angeles when the Italian, there's an Italian sailing ship that's doing like an around the world tour, and it's supposed to go into Los Angeles next summer, late June, early July. It's supposed to arrive in Los Angeles, and they want to be there to fly over that when it arrives in the port of LA, whenever it arrives. But that also means that if they're doing a North American tour, and specifically a Canadian tour for the RCAF 100th, it's going to be earlier in the season, probably in a June timeframe. And that's going to tie us right into the next section, which is going to be the events and the air show section I'll talk about. But just to be clear with the Italians, there has not been a schedule released. There's no official dates. I'm just speculating that it's going to be an earlier in the year, kind of late May into June timeframe to be in Canada. And there's a couple of shows that lines up with, and I'll talk about those here in a sec. The two air shows to tie into air shows, the two air shows that off the top of my head are most likely to include the Frecce Tricolori will going to be Bagotville, which is like the 23rd, the weekend of the 23rd of June, and then the Quinte, or the Quinte International Airshow, which is the end of June. It's the weekend right before Canada Day, or technically it's on Canada Day weekend. I think, let me look at a calendar. I think Canada Day falls on, why is my calendar not opening up? I believe Canada Day falls on like a Tuesday? Monday. Yeah, so the 22nd, 23rd of June is Bagotville, and the 29th and 30th of June is the Trenton Air Show, and so that's the Monday after is Canada Day, so it falls pretty close to that Canada Day weekend. So that kind of works if they're going to have the Italians in town, not only for Canada Day, but for these air shows. So there's a lot of kind of stuff seeming to line up. Time will tell when the official schedule comes out. Hopefully it's next week. Next week is ICAS. It's the week this video releases, really, December 3rd to the 7th. The 4th to the 8th is the ICAS convention in Las Vegas, when a lot of the air show schedules get announced. So you can expect to see a confirmed Thunderbirds and Blue Angels schedule, confirmed like the F-22, F-35, A-10, F-16 demos from the U.S. Air Force. Probably the Snowbirds and the CF-18 will have a full schedule announced. The Skyhawks might have a schedule out. The Navy, the U.S. Navy tends to release their schedule a little bit later in the year. We'll see if we start to see schedules come out for that. We should also get some firm announcements about the Red Arrows and the Frecce Tricolori, who are both doing North American tours. That announcement should be made hopefully next week as well. As these air shows start announcing their headliners, they can officially announce some of these foreign air show tours. So that's next week. I do plan on making a video at the end of that week, so probably on the 8th or 9th of December. I'll have another quick update video coming out talking about ICAS and some of the updates on these air shows, because it is going to be a very interesting a week for air shows and whatnot, and I'll make sure I get that content out to you guys. Also on Facebook, I'll be posting stuff live on Facebook as it comes out, and then I'll be doing an update video here just to update on specifically the shows I plan on going to, as well as just giving the everyone else access to see those schedules. On that note, we have had some announcements from some of the air shows, kind of talking about their plans. Quinte has made some big announcements, officially announcing, yes, the show is still going. They're committed to it. They have a Facebook page going on. I'll put a link down below to that, so you can guys go check that out. They've also announced ticket pricing, which is relatively cheap. I think it's like $10 a person to get in. It's like $35 for family pass. They've talked about, they haven't had, tickets aren't on sale yet, and they haven't given full pricing, but they have mentioned that there will be VIP, early bird, and photo pit available. Once tickets go out, some of that pricing will come out, as well as hopefully some sort of a schedule structure, so people can start planning kind of, hotels and driving and stuff like that to ensure everything lines up. They've also kind of hinted that the Lancaster and the B-25 from Canada Warplane Heritage will be there. They've also announced that they'll have a stealth fighter, which I'm assuming is going to be the F-35, possibly the F-22, but considering Canada bought the F-35, it would make sense to have F-35s there from the U.S. Air Force. And they also they hinted at an international display team, which my guess with what I just said is going to be the Italians, based off how all that evidence is lining up. Again, I'm hoping we get a lot more detail in the next week with ICAS on exactly what those schedules are, so we can move forward with that. Either way, I'm going. I already have a hotel conditionally booked for the Friday night, depending on timings. If it's like last time they had an air show in 2016, the gates didn't open till, I believe it was like 9 o'clock in the morning when they opened gates to the public. So I was able to drive down the Saturday morning, do the show and drive back. But if they're doing an early bird, a photo pit, like a 6 a.m. opening, that's too early for me to drive all the way from here. So I'll have to drive down the Friday night, stay in a hotel, and then do the early morning, and then probably drive back here in the evening, because it's only a few hours to get from Trenton back home. So that's kind of the plan I'm looking at. It's just, we'll see. We have to wait on information. But that's very excited to kind of start to see some of these plans coming together. As well, Thunderbird Michigan has been releasing some of their stuff. Again, until ICAS comes out, we've seen preliminary Thunderbird and Red Arrow, Thunderbird and Blue Angel shows, schedules from last year, and neither are going to Michigan. I don't suspect that's going to change. What we haven't seen yet is if they're going to have a jet team. I said last year they had the F-22. Who knows what my gut, based off the fact that their theme aircraft is the F-16. I suspect they're pushing hard for the F-16 demo, the Viper demo from the U.S. Air Force. Again, time will tell, but they have confirmed that the Commemorative Air Force's P-51, FG-1 Corsair, and the P-63 will be there, as well as the Evergreen P-38 from out the West Coast. Is it Evergreen? I want to make sure I'm giving the right information here. Just going off memory with that. Yeah, Evergreen Aviation. No, it's not the Evergreen Aviation Museum. Well, now, it is... Give me a second. I gotta do my Ericsson. Yeah, I was close. It's the Ericsson Aircraft Collections P-38 Lightning will be at the show as well. And the Great War Flying Museum from Brantford, Ontario will be down there with the Fokker DR-1, the Fokker D7, their Newport 28, as well as their Sopwith 1.5 Strutter. Now, they're all replicas, but they're all flying, and they do a really, really cool mock dogfight show, so that's cool. And as the theme is kind of famous fighters and the theme aircraft with the F-16, like I said, you've got P-30, P-38, P-51, P-63, FG-1 Corsair, and a couple of World War I planes. With the theme aircraft is the F-16, so who knows how many of those they're going to have there. So you can start to see a good show, the nucleus of a really interesting show being formed there. Gatineau is looking good. I've heard quite a few rumors, and I do have some inside contacts with the show, so I have heard some things. I am not going to share anything really until it becomes public, most likely next week. But a lot of the rumors are that the Red Arrows are going to be there. We've seen them confirm, not quite officially, but a lot of rumors of a late summer into the fall North American tour. So it's highly likely we'll see the Red Arrows in Gatineau and London. Again, hopefully next week we'll get some firm announcements out of ICAS exactly what's happening. But I've heard a lot of people talking about those two happening. Again, I've been told some other interesting stuff that they're working on for Gatineau, but I can't really say much until it gets publicly announced because it might not even happen. It's more of a wish list and what they're working on. So either way, Gatineau's looking good. Michigan's looking great. Quinte has a lot of potential, and London's London. There's been nothing officially announced, but they always manage to pull off an amazing show. So we're excited to see what's going to go on with that. Yeah, so next week is ICAS. We'll have a bunch going on after that. So we'll see what comes out of that. Moving on into incidents. There was one I had actually recorded to talk about in the previous month, but I missed it. So the bigger one that came out in I'm going to go back to October here, was the case of a Horizon Air Embraer where they had an employee riding the jump seat in the pilot. Oh my God. An employee riding jump seat in the cockpit with the pilots. And apparently just after takeoff into the cruise portion of the flight, he attempted to pull the fire handles, which would kill both engines, and put the aircraft effectively into glider mode. Initial reports that were coming out were saying that he was like nervous breakdown, 40 hours without sleep, and that he had taken psychedelic mushrooms. So we'll see. I haven't really seen like an NTSB report or anything on that. So I'll have to wait for that to come out to really see what's going on with that. But it was just a really weird situation. And he's been charged with like 82 counts of attempted murder. So, I mean, we'll see where that ends up going. But no updates on that one. Another one that I introduced in the last video that never got published was the incident in Houston where a Hawker 800 and a Citation Mustang collided on the runways. And the initial reports basically said that the Citation Mustang was landing and the Hawker was taking off on intersecting runways, and they clipped it, and the wing of the Hawker clipped the tail of the Citation Mustang, causing significant damage to the rear end of the Hawker, to the rear end of the Mustang, and taking the winglet off of the Hawker. The Hawker actually continued airborne, did a circuit, come back in and landed. The preliminary report from the NTSB has come out, and the report basically does not look good for the Hawker crew. It looks like the Hawker crew was never cleared for takeoff. They were instructed to line up and wait, and they just turned on the runway and they went. And they hit the aircraft on the intersecting runway. So again, until a lot more comes out and we actually get the ATC logs and recordings and transcripts and really get a feel for what happened, I believe the Hawker had a cockpit voice recorder, but the Citation didn't, or vice versa. So there's going to be a lot of data still to go, pilot in interviews and logs, and there's a lot of stuff for the NTSB to go through. So when the final report comes out, we'll see. And we'll probably get some information before that, I suspect, before the final report comes out. If it is found that pilot attempted takeoff without clearance, the FAA is going to step in and probably have disciplinary action on that pilot. And we'll hear about that most likely before we see the final report from the NTSB come out. So we'll get some more information on that. And as time goes on, like as always, I'll update throughout these videos as we go if I hear anything. Another big one that happened, this was in November 19th, down in Australia, 2 Marchetti jets, and these are Italian trainers, but they were privately owned in Australia, and they were being used in some formation flying, and they actually had a mid-air collision. Now, one of the aircraft was able to return to airport, and the other jet unfortunately went down in the water, with both passengers being fatal in the crash. So from again, initial reports, they were flying formation and they were recording for a TV show. And the idea of the TV show was, can you take professionals, business professionals, lawyers, doctors, CEOs, that kind of stuff, business professionals, and teach them how to fly these high performance jets, doing formation flying and, you know, certain aerobatic maneuvers. And that was the premise of the show. And during filming, while they're in formation, the 2 jets collided. So again, that's all we really have. There's going to be a lot of, again, investigating to be done in pilot interviews and stuff like that to find out exactly what the nature of that was. But it's not looking good in the sense that these people really weren't proper pilots. They were just people doing it with instructors. So we'll see kind of what that ends up coming out. I'm sure there'll be some tightening of some rules after stuff like that. So again, we'll wait for the Australian Transportation Board to come up with some investigating on that. And then finally, November 28th, so just a few days ago, it was announced that a U.S. Air Force Special Operations CV-22 flying off the coast of Japan, it crashed with 8 people on board. And the latest I heard was there was 1 confirmed fatality with the 7 others still missing, most likely fatal. The V-22 has had a pretty rough go of it. I think there's probably like 4 or 5 crashes a year with this aircraft in service in the US. This particular one, it was flying from, I believe, from Japan to Okinawa, and on the way it declared an emergency and diverted into another airport, one of the islands, and just short of the island it crashed in the ocean. And eyewitnesses had said fire was coming out of one of the engines, and the aircraft rolled on its back and went into the water. There had been some serious crashes recently. I was watching Blancolirio channel, went into it, some good detail. There was another crash a couple of months back or a year or so ago where they actually had a main gearbox failure, which caused an engine to fail, and you couldn't cross, and the aircraft lost control and went in. I mean, you can look up Blancolirio's channel if you want more in-depth looking at some of these incidences. I'm just kind of, you know, just the surface of the incident. But these V-22s are a very complicated aircraft. They are very, very complicated, and they're a hybrid aircraft helicopter, so they kind of have the worst performance of both. You know, in airplane mode, there isn't enough wing area to support any type of gliding. You've also got the engines really far out, so if you have any type of asymmetric thrust, it basically becomes uncontrollable. And in helicopter mode, you know, I mean, your blades aren't very big, so auto-rotating is not easy, and your engines aren't on center line. So again, if you have issues with one, your aircraft is unbalanced. It's basically impossible to control. So it's like you took the worst of an aircraft and the worst of a helicopter and put it together. You also get the best of both worlds when it's operational, but you have the worst of both worlds if any type of mechanical failure causes any problems. So it's got its issues. For what it does, it's amazing, and I know most of the armed services in the U.S. love them because of its versatility and its capabilities. But it's also a very, very dangerous and mechanically complicated aircraft with many, many modes of failure. So it'd be interesting to see where that crash happened versus the Marine one that happened earlier in the year, and were they similar? Do they have similar problems? And you know, what can you do to mitigate some of these issues? And in some cases, you can't. You just take the risks. But either way, we'll see more coming out of that. I don't see the U.S. military grounding or taking them out of service until there's some sort of a replacement aircraft that can do what it can do, because it's a niche and they need it. So we'll have to wait and see where that goes. But again, it's unfortunate, and we'll keep our eye out on that. So that's kind of the wrap up on this one. Again, apologies for not having a video come out in November. I honestly don't know what happened back then. I really don't. I remember filming it. I thought I edited it and put it up, but I might have just missed it completely, which is apparently what happened. So yeah, so as always, again, if there's any comments, concerns, that kind of stuff down below, leave a comment, fire me the email to the email addresses in the description down there. And yeah, there's some more interesting content coming out throughout this month. So keep an eye on this channel, stay tuned, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for watching.